Great to have you with us live in Atlanta. Joining me now, Speaker Pro Tem, Georgia House of Representatives, Jan Jones. Ms. Speaker Pro Tem, thanks for being with us. Thank you for your patience. Sorry for the delay.
Oh, no problem. It's great to be on your show again. Thank you, John.
Oh, Jan Jones, longtime member of the House of Representatives in Georgia, Republican from the Milton area. That's a northern suburb. Jan, I'm live today at the Avalon Hotel, not far from where you live. Tell us about your reaction to the governor's decision to open up Georgia and how this is playing out now, Jan.
Well, I think he's taken a reasonable approach that certainly allows businesses that are prepared to open in a measured way to do so, and those that either because their customers are not ready to come back or they're not ready to open to choose to remain closed. But let me just mention, John, most businesses in Georgia were allowed to remain open with certain social distancing requirements throughout this crisis, and many chose to close because they did not feel they could open safely or their customers were not comfortable coming.
What do we do now? I've talked to business owners, Jan, in the North Fulton area. I've talked to restaurant owners who say, I can't open because of three things. One, I can't get any employees because they're getting $900 a week in unemployment. Second
right.
reason I can't open is I don't have the money to stock up and do inventory. I didn't get a PPP or whatever. And the third reason I'm now hearing is, look, I'm afraid of litigation. I don't know, somebody gets in, They get sick, they blame me, I'm getting sued, I don't have any resources. In Georgia, how do you deal with that, Jan?
Well, I think some of this has to be dealt with at a federal level. And, in a perfect world, the Congress would provide some immunity for businesses who are doing the best job they have, unless there's a gross negligence, because we can't get people back to work unless businesses feel that as long as they make their best effort and that they can open with some immunity. And in terms of the changes that they have to make, it is a burden on the sanitation, the protective equipment, the testing, much of which there's still some shortages of these materials. When in the Far East, when they first met with this crisis, they used up many of the PPE, personal protective equipment, much of the chemical reagents to make the testing supplies, and we're just coming online with much of that. But I am very sympathetic to the businesses who are doing the very best they can.
When the governor made this decision, he got a lot of flack in the national media. I know you were probably consulted, you were a part of it, so now he's become the maverick in trying to open these businesses up. Do you have any concern that maybe he did this too early, they didn't look at the demand curve, or do you feel that Governor Kemp did the right thing?
Well, first I'm going to say, I'm going to quote after he left office, President Theodore Roosevelt said, "It's not the critic who counts; it's the leader." I'll paraphrase him, who's in the middle of the arena, making the best decisions he can. And I feel that way about Governor Kemp. And Georgia is not New York, and we certainly should not operate as though we are New York. Of course, my primary sympathies are with the families who have had a loss of life, loss of loved ones. But it is important to realize that will not be the case in the vast majority of cases, and people can still continue to make the same decision that my elderly mother-in-law and mother are making to, they will not be going out anytime soon. And people forget the goal of the stay-at-home, the shelter-at-home, was to flatten the curve, not eliminate the prospect of people getting infected. We have no, there is no drug that we know that definitively mitigates the effects of this virus. And there is no vaccine, and there may never be one. We don't know. I'm not a scientist, but the scientists don't know. And so we have to make the best decisions we can. I'm comfortable that the governor is, and I trust people's instincts. Those who are most vulnerable will need to be very, very careful for perhaps a very long time that they do not contract the virus. Others will be careful to keep the curve flattened, but I believe that herd immunity will be the only thing. I believe we'll have herd immunity probably before there's a vaccine.
But isn't what we're doing right now the exact opposite to get herd immunity? I mean, we're sheltering in place at home. People have masks on. They don't want to go out. Yep. Schools are closed, even though I think if the number of people affected by this under 18 is like 1 out of 10 million. Five people.
My understanding is we've had no deaths under the age of 18 in Georgia.
Why don't we have school?
Well, we did have to flatten the curve. I look at this through several lenses. One, I have constituents who have all different circumstances, but 3 of my 4 children are in healthcare. And one of them is an emergency room doctor in the middle of this. Another is an ICU nurse. And the third is a practicing physician in Haiti. And they all look at it from different perspectives, but we had to flatten the curve because we did have a shortage of ventilators, personal protective equipment, basic staffing of nurses and doctors. As that is now happening because the majority of hospitals have a low census count. In other words, most hospitals in Georgia do not have enough patients for the beds that they have. Mm-hmm. I think it is reasonable that people will begin, as they are, to go out more than they were, and some will need to take extra precautions. But the goal was never to prevent anyone from ever getting the virus because we can't.
Right, you can't.
Yeah.
They're changing the goalposts, but to get herd immunity, you've got to be out and about, and mm-hmm. people have to engage with each other. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're live today in Atlanta. We're at the Hotel Avalon in Alpharetta. With us is Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones. She is the second, leadership position in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives in Georgia. And the speaker there, David Ralston, the governor, as you know, Brian Kemp. So if you understand the way Georgia works in the Speaker Pro Tem's office, nothing gets done without going through Jan's office. And if she doesn't want to get it done, well...
I wouldn't say that. I would not say that.
That's the way Burkholder described it, your predecessor.
Well...
he said, nothing gets through without me. So, but anyway, so everybody knows it's a powerful position within the Georgia government, and Jan is just being shy. But Jan, let's get to. I've asked this question to every Georgia official that's come on, because I lived here for a quarter century. You've been here longer than that. High school football is a big part of Georgia community psyche. Right, it's just a big deal.
Right,
it affects the community. I mean, there's football stadiums in Georgia high school that fit 25,000 people. They've got corporate skyboxes. I mean, it's a big deal. Are we going to get high school football practice starting August 1?
You know, I think to be honest, and I don't mean to deflect. I think the bigger question is, will schools have classroom teaching August 1st? And I certainly hope they do, because many children have thrived during this school closures, but many children have not.
Right.
And I think that my number one interest with regard to that is that they are in the classroom learning. The same is true for college football versus students being back on campus. My priority is I love sports, but I played sports in high school, but I'm far more concerned about the young people who cannot learn adequately online, even in college. I mean, chemistry needs a lab, and organic chemistry, you need a lab.
Right.
And young people, just like in the Great Recession, are at risk of losing a year or more in their future as they would graduate on time from college or obtain the skills that they need. So I don't know, John, but the first decision, there will be no high school football if there's no in-class instruction. And that's true for college and high school. But even Kirby Smart, UGA coach, has indicated that. And so that's the first decision. I think that will come rather quickly, and I'm hopeful they will be back in college and back in school, because primarily young people, and under rare circumstances, are not grossly adversely affected, thankfully, by this virus.
Jan Jones with us, Speaker Pro Tem, House of Representatives, Georgia State Legislator. Jan, how is that decision in Georgia made, whether or not to have classroom teaching, cafeteria?
Sure.
Walk us through how that decision is made and who makes it.
So schools, K-12 schools on average, are funded about half locally, half by the state. The governor made the decision with his emergency powers to shut down schools statewide, although Fulton County, where I live, they were the first, because they had the first couple diagnosed cases in their schools. And so he could continue that if we saw, things started to go south, to use that colloquial term. But otherwise, should he not, local school systems would make that decision. Teachers, they're sort of state employees, but they're hired by locally, and local school systems have a lot of independence in making those decisions.
Let's just take an example. Let's take two areas. So when you say locally, is that the local school board, like you live in Milton?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But you're in Fulton County. So is that decision made in Fulton County, or is it made in Milton?
So in Fulton County, we have two school systems. One is City of Atlanta. They have their own independent school system. And then we have the Fulton County School Board, which has jurisdiction over the rest of the county, South Fulton and North Fulton. So they would make the decision. And, without children being in school, one, children aren't learning. Some children aren't eating adequately because they get much of their nutrition. And, but also parents can't go back to work.
Right.
I mean, it's very difficult without children in school. And so I'm hopeful that schools will reopen, and staff, will need to, if they're older or they have a severe pre-existing condition, they might not be there, or they might need to take, if this is going to be with us for years, some folks, depending on their profession, may need to find another job, because life at some point will have to go on for us.
So okay, just to understand, because you opened first, so you guys are going to end up being the model here potentially. So let's take Valdosta, right, which is Southwest Georgia. So is it possible? Is a scenario possible that the Fulton County Board of Education could say, yeah, we're just not ready to go back to classes. No, we're closed. Okay. And the Atlanta School Board says, no, we're closed. But Valdosta says, well, we only got like 3 cases in the county and nobody under 18 has it, and we're going to open up August 1st. We're getting back to school. So you get school systems open in Georgia, and then you get school systems closed. Is that possible, or does it have to be everybody?
It is possible, and that's how it's worked over this time period since the schools were closed. Some are very adept and ready for online learning, which anecdotally I've heard works relatively well for many high school students, certainly not old, and certainly not those who are struggling or who have special needs. But it's very difficult at the 3rd grade level or the 5th grade level for a child to operate independently, particularly if their parents work. And so I'm hopeful that all school systems will open, and that children who are in a position to go back, and for the few who may have who certainly we have many with underlying health conditions or their parents have them, they would be the exceptions. And we have online learning capability that has been, frankly, accelerated greatly, although it's not uniform throughout the state yet, but we'll be there. We're getting there.
All right, so you guys are getting there. So you're confident. Do you have a confidence level right now, Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones, Georgia, that some Georgia school districts are going to be opening up school as we know it, classrooms, cafeteria, and
I would
in
hope
August?
the vast majority, and the same is true. I would hope that the vast majority of colleges open, and that they make whatever accommodations they need to, just as Costco and other businesses have made accommodations, and those who are not comfortable, like my mother, who has health conditions and is elderly, she's not out and about at the stores yet, even grocery shopping, but children who are ready to go, ready to learn, that they will be in school and in college.
Who makes the decisions for colleges? Is that a state?
Well, now that's different than the local school boards. Colleges are half funded through tuition and half through a state funding formula. And the decision will be made at the Regents, which is the governing board, and they are all appointed by the governor. They hire the chancellor, and so between the Regents and the highest staff position, the chancellor, they will make that decision, and I would think it would need to be made relatively soon.
Georgia's going to get a shortfall in their budget like everybody else. One legislator, a state senator I talked to yesterday, said Georgia's going to blow through their rainy day fund in a couple of weeks. How do you continue to fund the state government with that deficit? And you guys, can't run deficits constitutionally like the federal government can. So if you blow through your rainy day fund in Georgia, how do you fund the government?
Well, I've been to this rodeo before. We blew through the rainy day fund in the Great Recession, and it was very difficult. And we had to trim the budgets of every service offered by Georgia. And unlike local governments, which are primarily funded through property taxes, which those are going to be stable for this year. Mm-hmm. At the state level, all 90% of our funding comes from sales taxes and income taxes, and they are already, we can tell, greatly down. I hope we do not go back before the middle of June. It would be irresponsible, in my opinion, to go back before then, because we need those May revenue numbers, because we're going to be making cuts that are going to affect the everyday lives of your average Georgian, whether it's, K through 12 funding, college funding, mental health, food, Medicaid, you name it. And so we need to have as much information as we can before the new budget starts on July 1. And it's going to be painful, John. Every state is going to be grappling with this in the nation. The federal loans, which in essence, that's what it is. It might not be a loan to the state, but I mean, it's debt. It's money they don't have. Can only go so far. And so we'll be making difficult decisions, painful decisions. But we're going to get through this. I just want to leave on a note here. My sympathies are with those who are hurting now, who've lost loved ones, who've lost jobs, lost businesses, but most importantly, those who've lost lives. But we are Americans. We're Georgians. We're going to get through this. I have every confidence that we're going to adapt and we're going to thrive and we're going to come out, frankly, better down the road.
Jan Jones, Speaker Pro Tem, Georgia House of Representatives, Georgia General Assembly. Some people say she's the most powerful woman in the South. We'll have to see.
No, I wouldn't say that. That's crazy.
I think you are, Jan. That's why I love being able to say, with us now, the most powerful woman in the entire South, Jan Jones. Jan, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate you making time.
It's been a delight.
Thank you so much.